Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining today's webinar. And now I'll hand it over to today's presenters.
Good afternoon. My name is David Coles. I'm one of the architects for IBM App Connect Enterprise here in Housley in the UK. And today we're going to be talking about migration to App Connect Enterprise version 13. On the chat, there's going to be Ben Thompson, who's Chief Architect for ACE, and also Sanjay Chowdhury, who is the Development Lead. So they're going to be keeping up with the Q&A, and anything they need to ask me to answer, we'll answer verbally as well. And towards the end of the presentation, hopefully the last 10 minutes, we'll have some time for some questions. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to take a bit of an introduction. We're going to do a bit of a recap for about ACE 13, because I'm sure it's still new to lots of different people. We're going to talk about some migration fundamentals, and then we're going to start diving into real migration and migrating to App Connect Enterprise version 13. We're going to look at some concepts, then some specifics, and then about something called extract migration. At the end, we hope to do a demo before finishing up with some questions. Now, this quick presentation is primarily going to focus on migration from ACE version 11, version 12 to version 13, and we're not really going to touch in any great detail on going from IRB 10 to ACE 13. If I was to include that information as well, then we'd add at least another 45 minutes to the time. So if there's interest on that, we can do another follow-up webcast later looking specifically at IRB 10. So App Connect Enterprise 13. So App Connect Enterprise 13 is the new version of ACE, the third in the line where it's been called App Connect Enterprise. And it's still a very trusted product. You know, the product has been going now for over 20 years. It's still used in a lot of the top companies around the world, still used in a lot of your credit card transaction, airline reservations, retailers, banks. So it's still a very important product used in over 2,000 clients in production around the world. And so, you know, ACE 13 is the latest in that line of products. And ACE 13 came out in mid-September this year, 2024, and it's our newest version. And in that version, we've kept our three main themes that we've been kind of working on for the last few releases, and that's around productivity, high performance, and connectivity. And so what do we mean by those? Obviously, productivity, we want to make it easy to use. So we've worked on enhancing our toolkit for that. We've also brought in the designer tooling. So those of you that have been following the App Connect product over the last few years, you've probably noticed that we have this designer tooling, which is a kind of a no-code authoring tool that was available on cloud, then it was available in containers, now available it's on-premise on your laptop from ACE 13. We've enhanced our Eclipse version to almost the latest version of Eclipse. We've got Java 17 support, and we've enhanced the content assist, graphical credentials management. So we've really tried to make a lot of things easier for the user to use, including developing those easier designer flows. In terms of high performance, obviously, we want to make sure that you can still get ACE, you can run it anywhere you want, whether that's containers, VMs, in the cloud on your own spaces, in our iPaaS. You can also run it on different platforms, AX, Windows, Linux, all the flavors of Linux, XP and Z. So all of those areas we still support, and we've still got that same core C++ runtime that we've been building on for the last 20 years. That is, you know, high performant, memory optimized. And finally, the other pillar that we've built our release on is around connectivity. So we've got that and lots of new connectors, discovery connectors that are in the toolkit, connecting to over 100 different cloud services and newer style endpoints. Plus, we've got those old connectors, not old, but existing connectors, MQ, HTTP, TCP/IP, all that base functionality. So, you know, we've got, you know, I think it's like over 300 nodes now in our toolkit palette when you actually go to create your message flows. And we keep enhancing them. As you've seen over the end few fixed packs of version 12 or mod releases, we're adding good 20 connectors each mod release, and we continued that in the 1301 release. So here's the announcement, which I think is just going to repeat some of those things I've also talked about. We've got the new toolkit, versions of Eclipse. We've got the new credentials updating in the toolkit. We've got Java 17 support, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we go down through this presentation. We've got some new JSON to mapping now. We've got that designer tooling. And so all of that information about V13 is available there on that link. And more importantly, we've actually got one of Ben's famous blogs. 1301 blog went up in September, and then there was one of these webcasts in September too. So you can click on that link down there, Discover ACE 13, join us, you register for the webcast, and then you can get the replay that you can watch later where Ben goes in all the great detail about 1301. Recently, hot off the press, Friday, 1302 was released. That's now available for download, and there's now a blog out there talking about all the great features that have turned up in 1302. Now, one of the things that the product life cycle, so we're just going to spend a little bit of time looking at this. So we're here now, the end of 2024, and if I follow down that line, we can see ACE 13 was just released. And ACE 13 is taking on IBM's new support standard, where you've got what we call 5 + 1 + 3. So 5 years of standard support, 1 year of extended support you can opt to pay for with new defects, and then 3 years at the end for extended support, but with usage and known defects only. So we'll help you get going, but you can't get new defects and fixes. So that's the standard new IBM policy on that 5 + 1 + 3. We keep following down that line. We've got ACE 12, that was released under 5 + 3, so 5 years standard support, 5 years extended. And that, from the 5 years when version 12 was released, that would look to end somewhere early 2026 before it goes into standard support. And then if we come down to V11, that was originally released on 5 + 3, it became 6 + 2 in terms of support. So you had 6 years of standard support, and actually V11 is going out of standard support now. And so we've got a lot of customers still on V11, we've got a lot of customers on V12, and those are primarily the ones that are looking to migrate to version 13. And down at the bottom line of that chart, you've got IRB 10, which actually became 7 + 3 in terms of support lifecycle, and that's getting towards the end of its extended support. So we've got a few customers left on version 10, but a lot of those have all migrated to 11 and 12, and so hopefully we can help the rest of you migrate forward over the next coming year or two. So that's kind of the brief intro of version 13. I definitely recommend going and checking out some of those other links to their blogs and the replays on the webinars if you want to learn more about 13. So now we're going to start looking at migration. So migration. So what have we got? So obviously we've got lots of customers out there that are running existing ACE, IB, and even WMB deployments still, and they want to bring those assets, their message flows, their message sets, you want to bring those forward to version 13. You've got existing bar files, you want to be able to run those unchanged with as few exceptions as possible. There's always going to be some exception, but for most people, you can bring your existing assets forward into version 13. We want to support kind of a staged migration, so you can run your existing servers and nodes in production, complete them there, start up your new ones at version 13, run them alongside. There's no need to do like a big bang switch or anything like that. We also want to give you some tooling to help with that migration. Previously to version 11, some older people might recognize a command called MPSI migrate components. That's later been released from replaced from version 11 with a tool called extract components. And we'll talk a lot about that in this presentation. And we also want to help you migrate to new topologies, talking about independent servers from nodes and to different platforms if you want to move from, say, AX to Linux or vice versa. So that's kind of what we aim for with migration, is to make it as easy as possible for our customers to migrate. And so at the kind of a headline level, V13 is a major release. So you do need to migrate your nodes, your existing deployments, your existing integration nodes, or your existing independent servers to 13. You can't just stop at 12 or 11 and start at 13 as you can for a fixed pack or mod release. You do actually need to take some steps, because in a major release, we take the chance to actually make some big changes, change anything architecturally that we can't make in a mod release, and actually bring components up to date. And you'll see that as we talk about Java 17 later. Now, the good thing to note is that V13 is architecturally essentially the same as version 11 and version 12. So for those of you that have migrated from 11 to 12, hopefully that was a very easy process, not too difficult. The change from 12 to 13 should be similarly easy, unless you're doing a lot of custom Java code, and then you may have a few more troubles. But the view for 11 and 12 customers is almost identical. When you go to 13, the web UI might look a little bit fresher, but essentially the commands are all the same. The flows and configuration, all that's all the same. If you are coming from version 10 or earlier, version 9 even, then you'll see a few more differences in changes for admin interfaces, security, configuration, things like that. And obviously, you've also got the chance when you migrate to say, okay, I'm using integration nodes now. Should I really be looking at independent integration servers and containers, or am I happy on nodes? So when you go about planning your migration, where should you start? Well, the first thing you probably want to do is start looking at a version, operating system levels, and is the new version supported on your current operating system level, or do you need to update, say, to the latest Red Hat or the latest AX version before you can install version 13? So that's always a good place to start. Make sure you've got your machine base upgraded, ready to go. Then you might want to think about, okay, what about the supported versions of what I connect to? So I'm connecting to Kix, I'm connecting to Oracle. Are those versions of those services up to date? Can I still talk to them from version 13? If the answer is no, then you probably want to plan migrations for those supporting services before you start upgrading ACE. The next thing you might want to do is actually get familiar with all the new features in version 13. As doing a migration is now a good time to think about changing some of your processes, updating some of your commands, maybe making some source code changes to pick up latest function. So think about things like remote queue manager support if you're using local queue manager still. Do you want to move to containers? Start thinking about all those kind of things. Can you make a new pipeline? Can you take advantage of some of our test capability that we added in version 12? Perhaps using IBM in package to improve your pipeline, things like that. So then you've got to start thinking about the ordering of your upgrade. Where do you start? Do you do the developer systems first? Do you go straight and upgrade production first? No. Most people start somewhere in the middle and have a play with version 13 or the new version on their kind of QA or test systems, upgrade those first, run some tests, see where they go. Then they might go and upgrade the developer systems next to try them out, or they might go forward to production and do the developers at the end. So think about the ordering, what makes sense for your service, your company, what makes sense for your processes. Do you have pipelines that rebuild and test things? So to really think about those sort of things. Now, as I said, if you're coming from 11 and 12, the upgrade shouldn't be too hard in terms of processes and changes like that. But if you are coming from version 10 or earlier, then you're going to have a few more challenges and a few more different things to think about. A few of them mentioned there, but we're not going to go into too much detail in this deck. Before you do start, always good to actually check out some of our links. Check out the known changes in behavior, check out the release notes, make sure you're at the latest fix pack or mod release level. Perhaps another key one is any APARs. If you've had APARs applied to your version 12 or version 11 environments, make sure they're either in 13 or you've got iFixes built for them from the support teams before you upgrade to make sure you don't hit immediate problems during your upgrade. Then just have a play. Install 13, grab the new evaluation edition. It used to be called the developer edition. Store it on your laptops, take the tutorials, try out some of the new features, and check it out before you start. So, what about concepts of migration? So, when we talk about migration, there's two key concepts that we talk about. You've kind of got the parallel migration, where you've got your old production systems, your old QA and test systems. You don't touch them. People start up. Some people come in, they create new machines, new pipelines, everything all new, where you create a new node, a new server, and run everything in parallel, run all your tests. Once you're going, you do a big switch over to that new system, route all the traffic there, all good. Your old system remains working. You're not going to have any problems there. And if your new system doesn't work when you move it in production, you can always switch back. Now, some people do their whole system in one go like that. Other people create a new node and just move certain applications at a time. So they do perhaps their insurance applications first, and they'll do their banking applications, and they'll do their HR applications, and just move stuff in a bit more staged manner from the old system to the new system. But really, the key thing about parallel migration is the old system stays working until the new systems are proven, because you've set up something new either on the same machine or on different hardware. The other main concept of migration used to be in-place migration, and we still support a version of that. And that was where you had your existing servers, which had the integration nodes on them. You would shut down, you'd run that mcrosign migrate components command. That would change all the config data on your node. You start back up and everything would be at the new version. And if things didn't work, you'd quickly have to try and back out and undo. And so from our point of view, that was never the favored option, but it was an option that everyone had to take. Some people had to take because they'd lost their source, so they couldn't redeploy. We couldn't give you your files back. There's a few other reasons why that was an appropriate thing to do at the time. But that command actually was removed in version 11. And in version 11, we invented a new concept called extract migration. That was first when it came out in version 11 and version 12. That was for a command called MQSI extract components. Those have now been reworked into new commands under IBM Int called IBM Int extract node and IBM Int extract server. But they do the same functionality as the extract components command did. And what that means is basically you take a backup, you use MQSI backup broker, you back up your existing node, you bring that to the new machine or on the same machine, you run that backup through this extract tooling, and that creates you an integration node based on your original integration node, or an integration independent server, which work directory which you can then build into container applications. And the good thing about this tooling is it was cross-platform. So if you were used to be running IBM 10 on HP or Solaris, platforms we no longer support, you could take your backup or your configuration from those platforms, you can move them to Linux, AX, Windows, etc., and you could run that extract tooling to create you a new node from the original data. And so that was really good. This obviously command, because it's not changing the existing node, it's repeatable. You just take a new backup whenever you want to try again, run the command again. And if you do want to do in-place migration, just take the backup, delete the existing node, run the extract tooling to create that node with the same name as it did before. And the good thing about this extract command and functionality is that it actually works with backups in version 7 or later. So if you're on a really old version, you can still bring that forward to the latest versions. Now, version 13 officially supports backups from version 10, version 11, version 12. That's the official platforms we support migration from. But if you're trying to come from older versions, give the extract tooling a go, and we'll still try and help you out. We want people to move forward, so it's in our interest to help everyone that wants to move forward as they come forwards. Now, just to highlight the fact that migration is kind of aimed to be simple these days, there's a few diagrams here that actually show that. So here's if you look on the diagram, so we've got on the left of the diagram, we've got version 11, version 12. So you can see all those familiar concepts you have under an integration node. You've got the node conf YAML, you've got server conf YAMLs inside each server, you've got a run directory in that server, credentials, you've got web users, DSN, palms data, and basically all that stuff gets copied across to the integration node at version 13. It's like a straight migration for all this stuff. Basically, there's a couple of tweaks that get made on the way, but essentially all that data just goes across in one format. Now, if you were coming from version 10 or earlier, because we did a big re-engineering at version 11, then there's a lot more munging and data manipulation and raw resource extraction and things like that has to happen when you come from V10 or earlier integration nodes and you're doing that extract migration. So you can see here that actually from that very simple diagram at 11, 12, you can see the idea of migrating forward because we've not made those architectural changes is a lot simpler. But coming from the earlier versions, there's a lot more stuff to do. You've got to create policies from the configurable services. You've got to move all those registry and other settings into the node conf YAML. And so, hopefully the migration people find easier. And similarly, if you're going from a node to independent servers, it's still a straight copy of most of that data across to your independent server. If you're coming from 11 or 12, coming from V10, it's a lot more complicated. So that's the end of the introduction phase. And if you come to any of our migration talks over the last probably 6 or 7 years, a lot of that stuff will be familiar. In that those are concepts and ideas we talked about over the last 6, 7 years, just marginally slightly updated for version 13. Now we're getting to some of the specifics, and here you'll actually find some new stuff that is applicable just for changes that in version 13, specifically those around Java 17 support. Now, across the following slides, there are some little circles here, V11, V12, V10, to actually show which versions the particular slide is applicable to help you as you go forward. Now, as I said, I'm mostly focusing on 11 or 12, so you'll see a couple of V10 ones, but not any real depth. There could be more depth for version 10 at a later time. Now, as I've said already, big migration headline, there was no massive re-engineering or changes to the administration or anything like that in v13. So everything should come forward pretty much as is. Now, you will need to create new v13 nodes because v13 commands and stuff, once you install, will only work against the v13 node. And your existing v12 commands or v11 commands, they will only work against v11 or v12 as well. So you do have to create new nodes. You can't just start up your 12 node with the 13 commands. It will block you from doing that. Now, if you have lots of custom Java code, then keep listening. And that's where you may have your biggest migration headaches as you come forwards. Now, admin migration. So the same security model and settings, the server channel settings, your web users, that's all the same as in 11 and 12. So everything you pick up from 11 or 12, any commands you run to set things up, those equally apply into version 13. The same thing with the commands. They're the same commands as are available in 11 and 12 are available in 13. The only thing that's not available is MKSI extract components because we took that out because we thought people won't have that scripted, and we put the functionality into IBM in extract node and extract server. Now, there are a few extra commands we've added into IBM Int. We've added credentials management, vault management into IBM Int, but the actual original MKSI vault and MKSI credential commands are still there. So we've removed no commands that people commonly script or anything like that. Web UI is pretty similar in version 13. We've changed nothing in the integration API or the REST API. We might have added a few bits, but nothing's been removed. And so that's all key as you come forward. Hopefully those things mean you can get up and running quickly with version 13. Similarly, no changes around configuration of monitoring, statistics, user exits, record replay, BTM. All those things are configured exactly as they are in version 13 as they were in 11 or 12. And so you should bring those configurations forward. Now, obviously, we'd still like people to pick up the MKSI Vault, the encrypted way of storing credentials, use credentials in place of MKSI setDB palms. But for now, setDB palms is still supported and it will remain supported through version 13. What we do in the future, still to be decided, but right now in version 13, there's no removal of setDB palms or anything like that. We will talk a few more slides on this later. Now, flow migrate, extremely simple going to version 13 in most cases. Now, the only node we've removed in version 13 at the moment is the Flex Engage request node. That was actually added in 12.08, but the cloud service that talks to the APIs we use are no longer available. And so we've had to remove that node from version 13. All the other nodes remain as they did before. There's no changes to the flow format. So because of this, most flows should work as is. Now, watch out if you've got Java Compute or Java plugin nodes that use external APIs, because the default Java version has moved from Java 8 to Java 17 in version 13 of ACE. More details on that. I'm going to keep mentioning this a few times so people start to remember that Java could be a big deal as I migrate. There's a few gotchas with the JSON parser. There were a couple in migrating to 12 from 11, and there's a couple more in version 13 as we've improved and brought our JSON parser up to date. Now, if you're using MOM, then we'd still like you to migrate to DFDL, but the MOM is still there. We've not removed it or anything like that. Obviously, we still believe DFDL is better, but we appreciate not everyone has got time or manpower to migrate to DFDL, but we'd still like you to do that. The other thing that's perhaps more important to do is to actually adopt applications, libraries, shared libraries. For those of you that are still using integration projects and broker projects, you'll know that when you deploy them to version 11, 12, or 13, all those independent stuff gets put into an application, a default application. So we'd still like you to pick up the applications and libraries, and indeed, there is help in the tooling from those independent projects. You can right-click on them and convert them to an application or a library, and we'd still like you to do that, but we're not yet forcing you to do that. The independent projects are still supported. You can still deploy them, and the code will still end up being pushed into a default application as you do that deploy. Deployed artifacts, again, no structural changes, anything that's worth mentioning in this area. And now we start getting on to some of the bigger gotchas for version 13. And that's around Java 17. So Java 8 we've used in ACE and IOB since, I want to say, version 9. And Java 8 is starting to get a bit long in the tooth. it's starting to get a bit old, but it has been the industry standard for a long, long time. 10 plus years, Java 8's been the standard Java version used by the industry. As Java moved up, first to kind of 11 was the first kind of version of Java that people kind of liked. Then 17 is the newest one. But there's been lots of changes, and it's only now the industry is really starting to solidify on only supporting later versions of Java. And it's the same for us. So we added Java 11 support in version 12 in one of the later fix packs. I want to say like 12.08 or one of the model releases. And so you could choose to use Java 8 or Java 11. And indeed, if you were using functionality CDC node, you had to use Java 11. But now in A13, we've removed Java 11 and we've brought everything up to Java 17. So if you create a new node, a new server, it's going to use Java 17 by default. And for most people, that's going to be okay, but not for everyone. If you look at this column on the right, the diagram on the right, the table, you'll see that we've got two Java versions, Java 8 and Java 17. There's lots of different bits of functionality that our product has in it. And you see most of that is actually supported in Java 17 and Java 8. And then you get to the bottom where the CDC node, that was the new node that required Java 11 before, that only worked in Java 17 because it uses APIs that require Java 11 or later. But there's also some other bits of functionality. WS security is probably the key one, as alongside global cache, that actually only work in Java 8 at the moment. And we're looking at options we do around that area. But those bits of functionality, WS security, global cache, core, they rely on functionality that was native in the JVM in Java 8 that was actually removed in Java 11. It's still removed in Java 17. So we've overcome some of those challenges in getting other bits of functionality working. But we have yet to get those bits working. So if you are using any of that functionality, you still have to keep using Java 8 for the moment. Watch out in future mod releases. We're actively working in this area as I stand here talking to you. So do watch out for that. Now, as I say, when you start a new node, create a new node, it does use 17. You can opt to use Java 8. There's an IBM specified JRE command. We'll see in a couple of slides' time that you can run to actually do that. The ACE13 toolkit is built on Eclipse 4.3.1, which I think came out in early this year. I think that's the 03.24 version of Eclipse. So that's really up to date. That uses Java 17, and it supports building your Java Compute Node projects or your Java plugin projects in either Java 1.8 or Java 17. You get to choose. So where does this lead in terms of gotchas and problems? So for most people who have written Java Compute Node code that's just doing tree manipulation, you'll almost certainly have no problems when you move forward to Java 17. The problems are only going to come is if you use external APIs. Perhaps those external API jars don't support Java 17, so always worth checking. If you've just used Log4j or Apache's common logging, those frameworks, they do support Java 17, so you'll be okay there. But if you've used some other stuff, JAX-WS, JAX-B, Corba, RMIOP, use APIs, do that, remove those. Those things have been removed from Java 17, or they're actually removed in Java 11, still called in Java 17, and that's what's caused us the most problems. And there's a couple of links here. There's the Semru runtime migration guide, which talks about the things that were removed in Java 11. And so if you are using a lot of external APIs in Java, from different other vendors, if you've got specific Java code yourself, come and read these documents that actually tell you what's changed in Java and see if there are anything supported still for you, or if you've got to make some code changes to your Java Compute Node or your Java plugin nodes. Now, if you were using Java 11 at ACE12 and you had no problems, then you're almost certainly okay with 17, because the biggest breaking changes were made between 8 and 11. And then it just followed on to 17. One of the other gotchas is because of the Cypher, the security provider that was changed. With Java 8, we use the IBM Java security provider. With Java 17, it's the OpenJDK. It uses the OpenJDK security provider. And so that's meant a few changes in terms of security. So the most notable of that is around Cypher Suite name changes. So what used to start SSL underscore when you have Cypher Suites now start TLS underscore. Now, even then, this is probably invisible to most people that don't override any of the Cypher Suite configuration. Now, we do, on several of our nodes, have facilities, so you can specify a particular Cypher Suite, TCP/IP policies, and the HTTP request node are the most used. There's a few others here. As mentioned, you can set the Cypher Suites to use. If you have set SSL_1, you probably just need to validate that either that's still supported or it actually needs to be renamed TLS at the start of that Cypher Suite to actually make it work. You'll find out when you try that version functionality, because you'll get an error saying, I don't know about this Cypher Suite. You'll just have to check that is available in the new Java version. In terms of Java Toolkit projects, as I say, new projects will be created using Java 17. You can set it to Java 8. If you do create with Java 17 and try to deploy back level to a Java 8 enabled integration server, they won't work. You'll get a Java version error. But you can configure the project to use Java 8. If you're bringing existing projects in that were set to comply with Java 8, those will still be compiled with Java 8 as you import them into the new version of the toolkit. The final gotcha that we know about at the moment is around the XSL transformation node. So when we run that with Java 17, because the XML parser and stuff that's available inside the new Java version is slightly different, you get syntactically equivalent XML coming out to the previous version. However, there may be slight subtle differences. The ordering of namespaces might be different, entity replacements might be different, but the actual XML that's generated is still syntactically the same. It's just not word or letter for letter identical. So that's hit some of our tests that do identical comparisons, but hopefully won't affect any customers. The final slide on Java is kind of the workaround slide. Now, as I said, you can, when everything's created with 17, but you can use the IBM Int specified JRE command to specify that a certain server actually runs at version 8. You can do it both for independent servers and for node-owned servers. So you can run that command. So, taking everything that I've said so far, you can, all your admin or your flow docs, you can bring those forward to 13. You can set your server to Java 8, and your migration to 13 will probably be fairly simple. But that's just the start, because at some point during the life cycle of ACE 13, maybe the end of next year, end of 2076, we're not quite sure yet. At some point, we will be removing Java 8 in a future mod release of version 13. So at some point, everyone will have to migrate to Java 17 or later, if we introduce a later version of Java during the life cycle of ACE 13. So don't use this workaround to stay at version 8 and think, oh, that's me done for the next 7, 8, 9 years. Because at some point, if you want to keep picking up mod releases, we will be removing Java 8. We can't do that until we've made all this functionality work that we want to make work. That currently doesn't work with Java 17, but it is in our plans. Java won't support us, because Java is ending support for version 8, and so keep that in mind as we go forwards. A few other things before we finish on this kind of specific settings. We've got new security settings. So when you first install ACE 13, you'll actually notice that we generate 2 new self-signed certificates with a 10-year expiry. Those certificates will last for the entire lifetime of 13.0. So all mod release and fixed packs will use them. And those 2 certificates, there's one that's used by the REST admin port, so that whenever you create new servers and nodes, they come up with HTTPS enabled by default. We've got a certificate there for that, and that certificate is available for use. And the other one is that we also configure the HTTPS connector by default, so that if you deploy any HTTPS enabled message flows, those can start up and run straight away out of the box in version 13. Now, you don't have to use those certificates. You can use your own. You can disable them if you want to, but they are there now. So what that means is, if you are migrating any nodes and servers across to version 13, and you didn't have SSL enabled before, they were HTTP listening, those will now start at version 13 with HTTPS enabled, and we'll pick up those defaults. You can disable it as the SSL mode property to turn it off, but just to be aware that anything that was HTTP when you migrate or create new, it will now start with HTTPS, and so you might have to turn that off if you don't want to use HTTPS. The actual HTTPS certificate used by the flows is only actually used when you deploy a HTTPS HP input node with use HPS ticked. And so, most people in production, if they deploy one of those flows, they'll have configured their own HPS connector. And so you don't need to worry because that custom configuration that you've given us will take precedence. 2 slides now on the JSON parser. So one of the key things we've done with the JSON parser in version 13 is that when you create a new integration node or new integration server, the JSON parser has been changed to parse everything or parse all the numbers that contain a decimal point as a decimal in the tree rather than as a float in the tree. Because a float, obviously, scientific notation, it's E numbers, and it doesn't have as much precision as a decimal. So you do get some kind of, it's kind of a lossy, potentially lossy thing. And we've had this property in the JSON parser configuration, number precision type, for a number of years, where a lot of our customers actually set that to decimal. If they're using numerical values to pass currency or anything like that through a flow, scientific numbers, where they don't want to be lossy, they've swapped their JSON parser to be working decimal mode. And actually, we've now swapped our default. So every new server that gets created will have the value of decimal specified in the server conf YAML file. You can swap that back to default, which means use floats if you want, but most people now actually need that as decimal, hence the change in defaults. And on the way out, we've done the same thing. So we used to write any floats out or any decimals out as floats, so in scientific notation, and now we swap that default around so all numbers come out with the decimal notation rather than with the scientific notation. And so again, there's a server conf YAML property that's now allows scientific notation that's set to false by default. You can swap that back to true and it will return to the old behavior. Migrated servers that are extract migrated, they'll come over with the old behavior, but all new stuff you create will have the new defaults. Final thing is the JSON parser now allows single JSON values without an enclosing object or array. So a new feature or standard or allowability was added to the JSON spec a few years ago that said you can just have strings or numbers or booleans at the root level. You don't have to have an object or array. And so we've added that support to our JSON parser, and that option can be disabled through the server conf YAML. Allow root primitives. It's enabled by default, but previously you'd have got an error if these kind of things not in objects or arrays were put into the flow and parsed. Now you won't. So just be aware of that. That one probably won't hit one people. The earlier one probably will. The other problem is really a problem if you're coming from V11 or 10. So which is around JSON parser. So the JSON parser didn't used to support validation. We added that in version 12. And so what happens is if you happen to have set in your properties parser on your node configuration, do validation, but the JSON parser didn't support it, so it used to ignore that setting. Now it will try to honor that setting and will try and look up a schema. You'll get an exception thrown if that schema doesn't exist, and it won't because it's not configured. And so you can say, ignore those errors when I've asked for validation of JSON, but there's no schema. So you can turn those off. We had a few people hit that during the lifetime of version 12. The HTTP HPS connector policies were removed in version 11. They're deprecated in 11.05. We found really no one used them. So we took them out. It's just configure stuff through the server conf YAML, as most people have been doing. The final slide, almost the final slide in this section, is about independent server migration. Now, you can run a V13 server against or 11 or 12 created work directory, but the idea with these is you actually build them. They're independent, they're for containers, so they really should be built as part of a pipeline. So you should have a pipeline that creates your independent integration servers, build up the configuration, eventually deploys. And so ideally, you just swap 11 or 12 or 13 in your pipeline. That would build your new workspaces and you wouldn't have to use your existing versions. Now, if you do decide to run V13 against 11 or 12 created work directory, please don't. Then you'll have to take care of any migration steps. So the Java version will default to 17, so you have to specify that back to 8 if you want. Plus some other gotchas there around optimized servers, HPS connector policies, things like that, that you will have to worry about if you do that. Now, this is really just an advertisement. Obviously, ACE 11 introduced the MSI Vault for storing encrypted data, so in this case, credentials, using AES 256 encryption. And that long-term is the replacement for setDB-PALM. You use Vault with a combination of MSI credentials. So as you're migrating, now might be a good time to take advantage of that credential and Vault technology. And what you'll find is that new function we're adding, such as the discovery connectors that were added in version 12, the 100 plus new connectors, they only work with credential. They don't work with setDB-PALM. So think about that. As you want to take advantage of stuff moving forwards, maybe setDB-PALM is something you have to look to migrate off of. And of course, what comes with using Vault and credentials is that you need to supply the Vault key to the process through MSI Star or through the integration server as you start it up. And so, you have to think about these things, but there are different options there that can take you forward. So we've got a couple of slides here just about extract migration. So because there was no real differences between 11, 12, and 13, the extract migration really just copies stuff out from the backup into the new locations. It also copies out things like the compiled schemas and maps. You can choose to ignore those if you want when you run the extract migration. Things like that. If you have got those HTTP connector policies that I'm sure you're not using, extract components won't pull those out, but it will warn you that they're being used, and it will migrate the configuration from them into the server conf YAML set in the correct place in the server conf YAML, so things will come across working as before. Configuration-wise, again, really nothing extra. We just pull out your server conf YAML files, your node conf YAML files, as they were configured before in 13, so nothing too clever there. If you are extracting to an independent server work directory, then when you create the server conf YAML for your independent server, we'll pull out various settings from the node conf YAML, combine them what was in server conf YAML to create your new independent server configuration. But all other stuff, the Vault, setDB-PALM data, everything like that gets copied across into 13 with my extract components. Now, the one thing that's also worth noting here is my Java, again, is the one gotcha. So IBM Extract does not attempt to analyze the contents of user Java code to see if it will work with Java 17. There's no tooling we've got or any we've seen that will look at your Java code and say, oh, you're using Corba or you're using JAX-WS, it's not going to work in Java 17. So it's up to you as the user to check the compatibility of your code and run it and work it out. What it does do, though, is it does attempt to detect the version of Java that flows contained within your server will actually work with. So it will look to see if you've got a Corba node or using WS security, and it will warn you that actually this functionality won't work with Java 17, and so it will configure the server to use Java 8. Now, there's also an override option. So if you're running IBM Extract Server, you can specify that the Java version to say, okay, extract every server from this backup and make them Java 8. So you can force Java 8 to be used. If you're coming from 11 or 10, version 12 introduced a new hashing algorithm for the web user passwords. Again, just a few notes there to worry about that. Extract components can't extract stuff, it only reference files. So if you've got configuration that points at key stores and trust stores in your configuration, they're not backed up with MSI Backup Broker, and so extract components can't extract those files. If you're on the same machine, not a problem, but if you've moved to a new machine, obviously you'll have to copy those files across to that new machine. But everything else is kind of generally pulled across: server start-stop state, app start-stop state, monitoring statistics, enablement. All that stuff is pulled across when you run extract components to version 13 from 11 or 12 node. And obviously the other thing that doesn't come out is server shared classes and node per server profiles. They're not extracted out at the moment. Some of those are in the backup, some of them aren't. So this brings me on to do a quick demo before we wrap up the final few slides. So I've got a window here that is what have we got? We have version 12.0.12.9. So I've got a node here, list, that is running. It's using a version 12, and it started up over here. And we can come in here and we can go and see that That node is running. It's currently listing on HTTP. It said it's not secure. We've got 2 servers. There's some applications in each server. And in this particular server, server 3, has a message flow that's got a Corba request node. So we're going to try and migrate that. And we're going to see what happens when it tries to migrate that to the version 17. So I'm going to stop that node. Just use normal access stop. I'll shut down the node, send the message to get it to shut down. And I'm going to use the backup broker command. I'm going to say backup this broker to a zip file in /temp. So I'm going to then take that backup broker. I'm going to pretend I moved to a different machine. Actually, this is the same machine. And down here, I've got version 13 running. I've got 13.02 as released last week. And I'm now going to run IBM int extract. Except I can't type. So I can see here, I've got 2 options. I can extract node or extract server. So I'm going to extract to a node. And it gives you all those help things that you can actually read the different options. So I want backup file, input, integration node, V12 node. I'm going to give it the output, integration node. I'm going to call it V12 node migrated. So I'm going to create a new node called V12 node migrated from my backup. And so it's gone through, it's loaded a version 12 backup file, it's loaded configuration for server 1, server 3, and then it's gone on to analyze those servers. So what it's found is there's a Corba node in server 3, and that tells me it's not compatible with Java 17, but it is compatible with Java 8. And so it's now going to set up that server to run with Java 8. So you can see it does analyze what's in the backup. And I can then start up that node. And the other thing we'll notice once we've started up is because backup in this node here, it was listing on HTTP. So I hadn't configured my admin for doing HTTPS, for doing secure comms over admin. So what we're going to find is that actually my newly migrated node will start up on HTTPS because it's going to pick up those new default admin SSL settings from version 13. So that's now started down here at version 13. I can do an MQSI list. And we can see here that's now listing on a HTTPS URL. If I come back to my browser, do a refresh, it's not going to like it because it's not HTTPS. I change the URL to HTTPS, and then it's loaded, and we see it's connected. We can look at my certificate, and we can see it's my version 13 local admin SSL self-signed certificate that's created during install. But otherwise, I've got my application here, with 2 servers. The server has those 2 applications in it had before. Server 3 has the same, that Corba app with the Corba message flow running. And this particular server is running Java 8, and the other server, server 1, that's going to come up with Java 17. So you kind of got a mixed mode there. Now, we're just going to finish off before we move to quick Q&A by a couple of words around ACE and Transformation Advisor. So IBM Cloud Transformation Advisor, it's a tool that's kind of cross-product. It's available, analyzes applications, integrations, and actually supports different products. So you can actually analyze WebSphere, WebLogic, Tomcat, JBoss, MQ, IIB ACE deployments, and you can run that tool against backups or bar files or WAR files, whatever the particular configuration is for the particular product. And it then provides you recommendations and about moving to the new versions or migrating from on-premise to cloud or migrating from, say, WebLogic to WebSphere. And so it gives you those recommendations, it gives you those reports, and it gives you gives you suggestions on things you found in those configurations that say, okay, it's easy to move this to a new version. And so shipped as part of App Connect Enterprise since 11.05, I think, is TA, so our TA data collector. So it's a command that's shipped with ACE. And you can take a backup of a previous version, 11, 12, 13 version, or you can take a bar file, and you can say to TA, analyze this backup, analyze this bar file, and it will go through and it will analyze your backup, and it will highlight things that are, if you've got 11 or 12 backup, it will analyze, say, okay, if you migrate to 13, you've got to worry about these particular things. And for every worry it gives you, it says, is it a simple admin change? It gives you a complexity rating. Is it a development change, or is it something really complex? You have to use an external, a different technology. And so it gives you these reports. So here I've analysed a backup, got 4 servers, and each server gets a different rating of how many issues or how many complexity it is in terms of moving it to the latest version or moving it from an on-premise installation to an independent container-based installation. And so here's an example of the reports. If I drill into server 1, it's told me here that this server is using a .NET compute node, so that's not suitable for running on Linux because it's Windows only in containers. And so kind of it's got a red severity. It means it's quite complex. You've got to do some flow re-engineering. And so there's 40 plus rules now that analyze for different things, and you can check out what those rules are in the documentation. So it's not a requirement to run that before migration, but it's quite useful to give you some upfront knowledge of what you might hear. Going forwards, some of you may be aware that last year the company bought a company called Web Methods and an integration product, and that kind of falls in the same realm as App Connect Enterprise. And what we're currently doing is we're combining those 2 products together. We're making a combined hybridized PaaS and the IBM integration iPaaS, which is going to contain both products. So both products will continue to be supported going forwards. We have lots of questions from people about, are you getting rid of Web Methods? Are you getting rid of ACE? And the answer is we're getting rid of neither of them. Both products are strategic going forwards. We're going to continue releasing new functions and new versions of each product, but we'll bring them together in one iPaaS where you can choose to use both products or you can integrate both products together. And we're doing some tooling around that. More details coming in the future. Final slide for me, please leave us a review. If you follow this QR code and you leave a review here, I think you get a $25 bonus, or you can go into a draw for something like that. But any of these places are great to get our reviews. We like your feedback. Hopefully this has been useful. So thank you. Hopefully there's been lots of questions in the chat. I can see Ben's been furiously typing for most of the last 50 minutes. So thank you. Ben, Sanjay, is there any questions that need answering?
I think we managed to get through all of them except for the last one that I literally have just opened, which is confirming that the data collector runs under v13 against the backup file in order to get that info. So I think you showed that on the chart. I think I saw that one pass by, so that may have just been a delayed reaction on that question. That's the only one that's unanswered. Everybody else should have either direct answers or in the public chat one way or the other, depending on what the topic was.
Is there anything that's worth calling out as a discussion point to go detail in that's relevant to everyone?
I don't think so. There were some questions about going from v10 as opposed to from the later versions. There was lots of other stuff about other features, specifically around security requirements, around OAuth and credentials and dynamic updates of policy and credentials, which are all good. We've shown forward progress in a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're all good. And there was one about Kafka I remember flying past. Some new features there worth checking out with integration with Avro and schema registry. So we've had all sorts in the chat, but nothing else that I think has gone unanswered there. So I think we're all good.
Yeah. Okay. So that sounds good. So I guess the only thing that stood out to me there was sounds like there is some interest in version 10 migration to ACE13. So maybe we can come back with a webinar somewhere in the new year where we focus more on some of the architectural changes between version 10 and ACE. And just to answer that question there, does the TA data collector need to run under version 13 to your backup file to get that info? So definitely yes, in terms of if you run the 13, what version it will work it up. I think the new rules may go back into the later fix pack of version 12. I'll have to check if we have updated TA in the later fix pack.
V12 certainly got an update after its initial GA, and there's also the choice of choosing different targets. So some of those could be software or specific to containers as well.
Because I know we just build the TA bundle once and then include it in both products. So it depends if we've updated version 12. But we can check for that, and maybe we can get TA updated in V12 so that you don't have to migrate to version 13 or install 13 to find that info. You just have to run on a most recent fix pack of V12. Question there just popped in. ACE13, will it work with ITX? We know the ITX team are working on supporting v13. We don't have a date for that support yet. They're having some challenges around upgrading to version 17, and they're quite excited about being able to use Java 17, but that is also presenting them some challenges. So we don't have a date yet. We've been trying to ask them for a date, but they've not given us one yet. So I think that is enough for me then.